Morning. So you have like 8 more minutes to complete the quiz if you haven't done so already. So a couple people are still working. Morning. Hold on. No problem, Hannah. So you have like 3 more minutes to finish up the quiz. Okay. I'm gonna run to the restroom. Okay, so it's 9:35, so probably if you were still taking the quiz, it would have kicked you out. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Happy Daylight Savings Tuesday. Olivia is gonna present today. And let me just check out what's coming up. Oh, that's the wrong class. Just in case I need to make any announcements before Olivia takes over. Okay. So I'm about to start grading your analytic responses. Next class, we have gender and sports. Lauren and Maddie are both presenting. And then a week from today is a break day. So they canceled classes on that Tuesday. And then the day after, Damien will present. Okay. And I'll tell you can look at what's coming up if you want to, but you just we can also like wait for a bit before we talk about it. All right, let me make it so that Olivia can share. Okay.
Okay, can you all see that? Cool. All right, so I did reproductive justice and I have a video. I hope it's gonna play and I hope everybody can hear it. But it's just on the history of reproductive justice.
Reproductive justice. A lot of people talk about it, but many don't know what it really means. Here's the basic idea. Coined by 12 Black women in June of 1994, the term is the combination of two phrases, reproductive rights and social justice. The new phrase reflected the lives and experiences of Black women in the United States who had been denied a full range of services and protections. Black women have multiple identities like age, ability, sexual orientation, immigration status, religion, and nationality, just to name a few. Consider the fact that Black women experience some of the highest rates of poverty and only make 63 cents for every dollar a white man makes. Nearly 20% of Black women have no health insurance and die 4 times as often as white women from pregnancy-related causes, regardless of income or educational status. The issue at play here is intersectionality, a term coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, which refers to how multiple systems of oppression work together. Reproductive justice is how we take on all the systems that harm us. Reproductive justice is the human right that can only be achieved when all women and girls have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our bodies, our families, and our communities in all areas of our lives. Reproductive justice centers the leadership and lived experiences of the most vulnerable, including but not limited to Black women, women of color, LGBTQ people, and youth. So there you have it. Reproductive justice has given thousands of women a framework to change policy, improve services, collaborate with other social justice movements towards our collective liberation. For more information, contact In Our Own Voice at www.blackrj.org. Thanks for watching. And
Okay, so I wanted to kind of talk about the difference between reproductive justice and reproductive rights, which was something I wasn't super familiar with before starting the research for this presentation. So reproductive justice, it highlights race, class, and gender inequalities. It also highlights more, but those are probably the 3 main inequalities. It challenges the individualizing and depoliticizing tendencies of the medicalization of women's bodies. It emphasizes cultural and social conditions needed for women of color and low-income women to make choices not just about their bodies. And the movement started because of tensions with white middle-class feminists, and it's focused on removing barriers to access. Whereas reproductive rights, it was started by white feminist middle-class activists, and it's all about their argument for abortion access specifically. It relies on a language of choice, which, so say you remove the legal barriers to abortion and the government says, okay, it's legal, go ahead, you can have abortions. With reproductive justice, it's kind of recognizing that just because you have that choice doesn't mean your access is equal. Reproductive rights don't take into consideration race, class, and poverty. It's not intersectional and inclusive, and it's all about focused on gaining legal access to abortion. It's just that one issue, whereas reproductive justice is a very wide range of reproductive health. Okay, let's see. So one of the readings we had to do for class today was Loretta Ross's What is Reproductive Justice? So reproductive justice looks at how women have control over their own reproduction, not just by choice and access, but by community conditions and inequality. For example, a white woman living in the Connecticut suburbs and a Black woman living in low-income housing in Chicago will have very different experiences when it comes to reproductive choices and their ability to access reproductive health services. Abortion is not the sole focus of reproductive justice, like I mentioned earlier. And reproductive justice also focuses on ending reproductive oppression, which is the desire to control women and girls by placing restrictions on their bodies and reproduction. Loretta Ross continued, she outlines 3 main frameworks for fighting reproductive oppression. Number 1 would be reproductive health, which is service and delivery. Number 2 is reproductive rights, which is legal issues. And number 3 is reproductive justice, which is movement building. And it's focused on the ends, not the means. I thought this was a really good way to put it into perspective. So the means is birth control and abortion access, and that's what reproductive rights is focusing on. But the ends is healthier families, sustainable communities, and better lives for women. The reproductive justice movement really has that in mind. They're not just focused on, okay, yay, we got abortion access, we're all set. Reproductive justice realizes, no, there's more to it. We need to do more for women. And then Ellen Willis's Abortion is a Woman a Person? So in case people aren't familiar with the terms pro-life and pro-choice, now these are really big generalizations. If you identify as pro-life, you might not fit this definition. Vice versa, if you identify as pro-choice, this might not be the definition that fits your personal beliefs, but in general, pro-life believes that abortion is murder and should not be allowed, whereas pro-choice believes abortion is a woman's personal choice. And then Ellen Willis writes that fetal personhood is ultimately as inarguable as the existence of God. Either you believe in it or you don't. And with fetal personhood, that's what people who have the pro-life believe that fetuses are people. And when you have an abortion, you are killing a person. And another quote that I think really puts things into perspective is, however gratifying pregnancy may be to a woman who desires it, for the unwilling, it is literally an invasion. And you have to think that not every woman who becomes pregnant really wants that pregnancy. They might not be in the best mental space to be pregnant. They might not be in the best physical space to be pregnant. They might not be able to afford it economically. It might just not be the right time in their lives. Maybe they don't want kids. There's really a plethora of reasons why someone might not want to be pregnant. So as great as it is for some women to be pregnant, others want to have that choice. And then Ellen Willis also looks at, is pregnancy a punishment for women who have and enjoy sex? So I thought this was interesting because men can kind of go around and have sex with pretty much little consequences. Men don't have to worry about getting pregnant themselves, but women, one mess up or like one condom break and they could get pregnant. So is that punishment for them going around and having a lot of sex and enjoying sex? And I also want to talk about pro-lifers and the range of exceptions for having an abortion. So someone who holds a pro-life view might have certain exceptions where they think, okay, in this instance, an abortion is okay to have. Examples of this would be rape, incest, if the mother's health or life is in danger, and if the fetus will not survive. So some pro-lifers don't think any exceptions are okay, and some pro-lifers think maybe these are, maybe they go further. Like I said, pro-life is kind of a spectrum and a generalization definition. I also wanted to go over legal barriers to abortion access. So this is what the white middle-class feminists are basing their fight for reproductive rights on. So we're all familiar, I think, with Roe versus Wade, which is the Supreme Court decision that established the right to a legal abortion with minimal government restrictions. However, states really love to push that minimal government restrictions clause in Roe versus Wade. There is the Hyde Amendment, which is a legislative provision that prevents federal funds from being used to cover the costs of abortions, except in the instances of rape, incest, and to save the mother's life. This can be a disadvantage to low-income women who can't really afford abortions. And then states have the ability to pass abortion laws, like I said. Recently, the governor of Arkansas signed a bill into law that prohibits all abortions except if, quote, it's necessary to save the life or preserve the health of the fetus or of the mother. There is no exception for rape or incest. This is considered to be one of the stricter state abortion laws that we've seen. And the ACLU is going to bring this to court and fight it because of Roe versus Wade. And finally, I wanted to talk about Planned Parenthood. So there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about Planned Parenthood and the services they provide. Some people believe that Planned Parenthood is an abortion factory, basically. They actually can't use federal funds for abortions under the Hyde Amendment, but some of the other services that Planned Parenthood offers are abortion services, birth control, emergency contraception, general health care, HIV services, LGBTQ+ services, men's health services, patient education, pregnancy testing and services, STD testing, treatment and vaccines, and women's health services. So Planned Parenthood does a really large range of health services and is especially impactful for low-income communities. And this is just a picture of some protesters outside of a Planned Parenthood. They have signs that say, men regret lost fatherhood, abortion hurts women, pray to end abortion, women do regret abortion, stop abortion now, every life is precious, all lives matter, stop abortion, and pray to end abortion again. So these look like more peaceful protesters, but at Planned Parenthoods, you do get some more violent protesters who will actually verbally assault and heckle women, tell them that God's going to send them to hell. And I mean, these women aren't necessarily going in to have an abortion. They could be going in for pregnancy testing. They could be going in for STD testing, but these protesters can actually make it really difficult for women to access these services. And then I have my questions. So we're going to start off. Do you see any problems with the reproductive justice movement? Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't, that's a really good question. Maybe we can come back to that one after some of your other questions, because gosh, I can't think of any. And so either, you can kind of answer, or we could work our way back around to that. Is that
all right,
okay?
yeah, let's work our way back to that. So another question, I guess this is personal opinion, and I know abortion's kind of a touchy subject for some people, but should the legal barriers to abortion access like the Hyde Amendment be removed? And who might be impacted by something like the Hyde Amendment? Does it, impact a certain group of women more than another group? And does this make these legal barriers more unfair?
My thought process on it is like you walk into a room, and if someone were to ask anything about like your medical history, you can answer and be like, that's none of your business. So in terms of like getting an abortion, like rape, like my answer would be like, I don't know, that's none of your business. So like, why is it? Because what, it's a woman's body and it's not, men aren't affected by it. This is why there's no argument. Like that's how I feel about it.
That's a great perspective. Thanks for sharing. Okay, and then my next question is kind of from the reading that we all did. So, what is the argument behind is a woman a person? Are groups trying to give fetuses more rights than women?
It kind of seems like they're just trying to give fetuses more rights than specific people in general.
I would agree. Anyone else?
And I feel like kind of with like more the second part of the question, like I agree with River. And I feel like something that a lot of people don't really talk about, or maybe don't think about at first, is a lot of people who are like pro-life, they don't want you to have an abortion. But like you said before, if someone can't afford it, what if they can't get help from like the government to be able to afford and take care of the child? And then you're seen as a bad parent because you can't do this and that, but you didn't want to be a parent in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then, what are your thoughts on groups that protest outside of Planned Parenthood? Are they harming or are they actually helping?
I think it's harmful because, let's be honest, if it were anyone else besides the people who were shown in that picture, it would be the absolute end of the world.
I think there's a joke on Veep. Do you guys watch Veep? Any of you? Like, there's a joke on Veep that said something like, if men could get pregnant, you could get an abortion on every street corner from like a vending machine or something, right? So yeah, that's kind of a not really an answer. So the problems with reproductive justice movement, kind of working back around, I think it's good that it's inclusive now, and it's for women who I think like the Hyde Amendment, like the people who are impacted by something like that are people on Medicaid, right? Like who depend on the government for their health insurance, right? And who are low income women, often single mothers, like food stamps and stuff like that. So like, yeah, like I feel like reproductive justice helps kind of make space for women who are less privileged. But do you see any problems with it, Olivia?
Not really. I think reproductive justice is a really great way to look at the reproductive rights movement as a whole. And the only thing I kind of thought about is maybe it kind of feels like it's just a women's issue still. I don't know if we're really, incorporating the men and getting their support. Like the reproductive justice movement, yes, it's way more inclusive for like low income women, women of color, women who live in rural areas, but are we getting the support of men in this movement? That was my only concern.
And maybe non-women identifying, right?
Right.
Yeah, really good insight.
Yeah, so that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Okay. So everyone's quiet today. Maybe it's because, as Olivia mentioned, abortion is kind of a, I don't know, maybe it's a kind of a fraught issue. Maybe it is. Of course it is, but like, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, let me thank you everyone for thanks. Yeah. All right. I mean, obviously it's a fraud issue, but yeah. Okay, here we go. Abortion and reproductive justice. So you can't really have a class on intro to gender and diversity studies without talking about abortion. It's been kind of one of the main kind of, you know, platforms of the feminist movement since the 70s. And it continues to be a really kind of, you know, a big part of the feminist movement. Do you guys know the Women's March when Trump was first elected back in 2017? We had the first Women's March. So Trump was elected and people, you know, especially women felt like, you know, they needed to kind of show themselves and kind of, you know, they wore pink pussy hats and like show that like women would not be silenced, and they saw Trump's election as really dangerous and regressive, which of course it was. And so they went and they marched, but the people who organized the Women's March, initially they let in a group that was you know, pro-life. They said that they were like you know, that they're like for women, but they were actually pro-life. And then a bunch of other groups like thought that like you couldn't actually be a feminist and participate in the Women's March while being pro-life. So then they were kicked out, and then like they kind of fought that. So it's a fraught issue in the field of feminism. You can't really have a class on gender and diversity studies without talking about it. I thought we could start by kind of just writing down in discussion 12.1, one point from today's reading that you found surprising, interesting, compelling, maybe a point that you kind of weren't sure about, you found it confusing. So take, you know, like three-ish minutes and kind of write down one thing from the reading or about abortion or reproductive justice in general that you would like to kind of talk about today. I'm going to stop sharing so you have your whole screen as soon as my, okay, there. Emma, is that a direct quote? It feels like a direct quote. And if it's not, I'm just like, nice, but
It's close to it.
sounds good.
Paraphrased.
I was like, oh, this sounds very, very professional. It's polished. Okay. Yes, Stacia, yes. Have you guys heard of reproductive justice or reproductive rights before? Or had you like mostly heard like the term abortion?
I really only heard about like abortion, not really
Repro-
anything about reproductive justice. I guess that could be like one thing that's like a like that first question that was on the question slide, that they're not really seen enough. I guess that could be like one
One
problem
problem with
that they're
reproductive
not
justice.
seen enough.
Yeah. There you go, Crystal. No problem, Kayla. I just am seeing your message now. Good, Noah. Mhm. Yes. Good, Jared. Good, John. Yeah. Good. So, so a lot of people have posted. Thank you for posting on the discussion post. You guys are raising already some really good points. I have a ton to share with you, but like what I really want to get across to you today is like so often abortion is kind of decontextualized. So like it becomes like kind of a philosophical issue, like, you know, murder is wrong and you're killing a child, and and if you kind of strip it from everything, then it becomes much harder to justify. But like you can't strip it from everything. You can't strip it from, class and race and economics and medicine and education and stuff like this, right? Because the same people who are legislating to prevent abortion are also legislating to prevent sex education in school, or they're preaching abstinence only. And that has been shown in studies that it doesn't work. Like studies are very clear that abstinence only education just does not work. And so what you're telling people is, don't have sex. And if you get sex, you're pregnant and your life is over. It's like saying like both like you're not mature or adult enough to have sex, but if you do, we're going to punish you by making you raise a child. It's kind of backwards, right? So you can still, we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. All right, here we go. So we're starting kind of with the most historical. Is abortion a person? So this is, or is abortion a person? Is a woman a person? I don't, self. So we're starting with the most historical. And so she basically is kind of taking on this argument that like, you should never do abortion. She talks a lot about women's rights versus fetuses' rights. Okay, so do you guys know about some of the arguments about, is the fetus a person? What are some arguments that say, the fetus is a person and should not be touched? Or what are some of the like, yeah. Do you guys know any of these kinds of arguments? Have you heard?
Once it has a heartbeat, it's a person.
The heartbeat bill. Yes, exactly right. So a lot of people say that once a fetus has a heartbeat, it's a person, and you can't, kill it, right? So the heartbeat bill is a kind of one big kind of thing. Do you guys know at about how many weeks a fetus has a heartbeat? So a pregnancy, usually pregnancies are 40 weeks. Do you know at what point a fetus has a heartbeat?
Isn't it 12?
Earlier.
No.
It's 8 weeks.
Oh, 8. Yeah.
Like at like about 8 weeks, a fetus has a heartbeat. And so what does this mean? One thing they don't tell you, okay, normal pregnancies, this kind of blew my mind when I got pregnant. Normal pregnancies, they say, are 40 weeks, but they count the pregnancy from your last period, not from conception. So this means that like technically, even before you get pregnant, you're a couple weeks in. So at 8 weeks, that's one missed period. So if you're not allowed to get an abortion except before 8 weeks, you got to be like really like
You
looking
might
to
as well just test every single time.
exactly right. Like especially because sometimes in the early stages, pregnant women have spotting. Um, and you know, so like the heartbeat bill is so tricky because it really doesn't allow much time for women to even understand that they are pregnant, much less do something about it. The other thing is like if it's 8 weeks into 40, like when I was with my first kid, I was so excited. And I had one of those apps where you check for every week what the baby looks like. And it took forever for the baby to not look like an alien tadpole. like, like I was kind of like when is it gonna look like a child? When is it gonna look like a human? Like I already had like all these feelings toward it, and I was like, like I said, alien tadpole. So like the other thing is like it takes a long time for like their brains to develop. The heartbeat is like what like it I feel like it's been kind of focused on because it's so early. Like it seems just as I don't know, just as like just because it has a heartbeat doesn't mean it's going to survive at 8 weeks if you take it out, right? Like it doesn't have a heart, like it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have lungs, you know. So there's kind of one kind of argument surrounding it. And basically it comes down to what you believe. This is, I mean, Olivia went over this, so I'm not gonna kind of rehash it. Another thing that people really have a problem with is late stage abortion. Have you guys heard about late stage abortions? What are late stage abortions?
Isn't that like when you're in the final
Trimester.
trimester of pregnancy and you decide that you want to have an abortion?
Yes. And so usually a lot of people are interested in kind of you know, outlawing abortion after like 20, 25 weeks. Because around 20, 25 weeks is about when you can remove the fetus and it has a chance of living on its own, although with tons and tons of medical help. So a lot of like kind of like compromise stuff is like, well, maybe we should just legislate and, you know, make illegal late stage abortions. And they have these images of people like partially delivering a baby and then like cutting its head off or killing it. I remember reading like a story about this in one of my like religious magazines when I was in middle school, and I was just so horrified. But like that doesn't actually really happen very often, because if you're looking for an abortion, usually you get it before the third trimester. Why would you go through all of the horrible physical changes, the exhaustion, the sickness of the first and second trimester, only to like kill it in the third semester? That doesn't really make sense. And not really, women don't really do that. So what might lead you to get a late stage abortion?
Financial situation, your body metabolizes a different way so that you don't actually look pregnant until you're about 6 to 7 months in. A lot of things could happen.
Yeah, could be. Basically, what I have come to understand is that people only get late term or late stage abortion when the children, like the babies, the fetuses, have like severe medical problems and probably won't survive. So like tumors that make it impossible to carry the baby to term and stuff like that. So this is another reason why like people see kind of, well, maybe we should just outlaw late stage abortion. They see it as a compromise, but what they are actually doing is like, again, neglecting the voices and experiences of women, you know? Okay, so there's all these kinds of pro life arguments that try to kind of compromise, kind of say things, but again, ignore women's voices and women's experiences. I think Olivia mentioned this, and I think it's such a good point that like for an unwilling woman, pregnancy is literally an invasion. Like in America, like we have the stand your ground law. Do you guys know about the stand your ground law? So like it was made famous in Florida with the Trayvon Martin case. In the stand your ground law, basically the idea is that if someone comes into your house, you are allowed to kill them. It's not murder, it's self-defense, right? And so like if a fully grown person with a family and stuff comes into your house and you feel threatened, you can stand your ground, shoot them, and not be prosecuted. That's considered allowable, but like, so like, how is kind of like pregnancy different? Why would it be outlawed for you to kind of protect yourself in that way? Well, the only reason might be that like women are seen as less human, right? Are less valuable as people, have less rights as people, right? And that a fetus has more right to life than a woman has to protect herself, right? I mean, like, so that's that. So what are some of the reasons women consider abortion? Getting abortion. Olivia mentioned this. What are some reasons?
If it was from a rape.
Yeah, here's a chart. It's from 2004. So like women's abortion decisions rarely stem from rape or incest, because a lot of like the legislation is like, oh, abortion's illegal except for in cases of rape or incest, but actually they're not that common. So these are their main reasons. Having a baby would dramatically change my life. I can't afford a baby right now. I don't want to be a single mother, or I'm having relationship problems. I have completed my childbearing. I already have lots of kids and I can't have another one. Very few rape and incest. Okay. So if you look at this kind of chart, and people do, they look at something like this, and I'm trying to kind of look at both sides and kind of give voice to people who might like, you know, be on the other side to kind of better understand them. Make sense? Does this make sense? Yeah. So like looking at this, like having a baby would dramatically change my life. Like a lot of people would look at this and be like, well, that's super selfish, right? Like, but this is the exact thinking that says like, well, having a baby would dramatically change my life. And then they say, well, then you shouldn't have been having sex in the first place. But isn't it women's right to have and enjoy sex without facing the consequences, especially given that like, who gets stuck with the baby? The man doesn't. If you're lucky, he pays child support. But that's like one thing that they do to support it. Whereas women often give up their jobs, or they have to find new jobs, or, you know, and some women just don't have the social, the supports, right? So like, there's all these reasons. First off, like the kind of burden of an unwanted pregnancy and raising a child after that disproportionately falls on women, right? So if you want women to not have abortions, hold men accountable rather than outlawing abortions, right? So the other thing is, how much, do you guys know how much money it takes to raise a child?
I actually saw a study back in my freshman year or sophomore year of high school. It on average in 2014 takes $50,000 to $60,000 to raise a child to age 13.
Okay. That seems low to me. Actually, considering how much I pay for childcare, or I did before the pandemic, right? So
I don't think it includes childcare. I think it's just like medical bills, food, housing,
clothing. Yeah.
clothes.
Yeah. So so before the pandemic, so I am lucky because I am in a relationship with another adult and we're married, and like so the state recognizes that, and we get a cut out like we get a bit of like relief on our taxes and stuff. Before the pandemic, all of my paycheck went to childcare, my entire paycheck. Okay. From birth to age 17, so without college, according to a 2017 report, and adjusting to inflation in 18, so it's probably higher. From raising a child costs more than $250,000. Okay. All right. So this was a 2017 report. So in urban areas, it's higher, in rural areas, it's lower. This is not including college. It's a lot. You don't realize how expensive it is to raise kids until like you look at the cost of diapers. You look at maybe you need to do formula, especially if you are a working mother and you're not given time, paid time to pump, right? Or your kid doesn't, latch, right? Like, so diapers, formula, childcare, and none of that is government subsidized. None of it. Okay. And so like, again, like, it just seems like if you're going to outlaw abortion, you got to help women. If it's about life, if it's about kind of helping children and protecting children, you actually got to step up and do that, right? You got to like make sure that children are fed. You got to make sure that children have diapers. You got to make sure that children are clothed. You got to make sure that children have childcare, right? Oh yeah, I was gonna, hold on one sec. The other thing is like, how much paid maternity leave do women get in the United States? Paid maternity leave in the United States. Hannah?
Not enough.
Not enough is true. Hannah?
Well, it depends who you work for.
So according to the federal government, women get 0 paid time off to have a
Right.
baby. You don't have
So
to pay them. Right?
Your
So like if
women
you have
hope
a
to
baby,
get-
people assume you're on vacation.
Mhm.
You get paid vacation, but you don't get paid time off to have a baby. Sorry. Go ahead, Hannah.
No, it's okay. If I was gonna write a paper for my capstone for GDS, I was gonna write it on maternal and paternal leave. This
Yeah.
is like one of my favorite subjects. Women in America, they hope that they're working for a good company. They're just hoping, and that company has their own policies on maternity leave and stuff like that. So that is just another oppression. And when we go into like minorities and lower income neighborhoods and women that are lower income households, this, that, and the other, they're not working for good corporations or businesses and stuff that are most likely gonna be understanding of having a baby. So again, like women are
Fast
facing
food, right?
consequences
They're
when you
working
have
at
Norway,
McDonald's or
Finland.
Walmart. Sorry.
Right. They're not, but Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, a lot in the UK.
Every other country in the world
Literally.
literally gives paid maternity leave.
And a lot of them do paternal. So they understand if there is a father involved, they understand that a father is just as capable of being have maternal instincts as a woman. And sometimes if the woman makes the money in the household, the father gets paternal leave. So yeah, America just hasn't really been doing it right.
So in America, there is no federally mandated paid maternity leave. You can have 6 weeks off once you have a baby, and you can't be fired if you do decide to take those 6 weeks. But a lot of women can't go 6 weeks without a paycheck, right? So this sort of changed a bit when Obama passed the Family Medical Leave Act. You guys know about that? The FML, Family Medical Leave Act, yeah, which grants paternal leave as well as maternal leave. at a kind of fraction of your income, but like only about 60% of people qualify for the Family Medical Leave Act. And so it again, like, again, it doesn't cover the most vulnerable, right? Have you ever heard of parental consent laws? This was another kind of attempt at like compromise. Have you heard of parental consent laws?
Yeah, like because as a grown female adult, you need to go ask your mom and dad what you can do with your body.
Right. So in certain states, like the idea is that like you can get an abortion if you kind of tell your parents that you're pregnant and they give their consent. And if you don't ask them and they get their consent, you have to have a child. Like this is like extra illogical, right? Like and what it led to is a lot of women trying to get illegal abortions and dying from infections and stuff like that, right? If your parents are not around, you could alternatively present your case to a judge, and the judge might give you permission to get an abortion. Again, women are treated as children. Like always, like no matter how old you are, women can be treated as children and then are punished by being made to raise children. Like it's kind of like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, women do not have a right to human. So discussion 12.2. What are some of the risks of pregnancy for a woman? So like one other alternative is like just carry the child. One other argument is just carry the baby for the 9 months and then put it up for adoption. What do you think of that argument? Write a bit about it in discussion 12.2. What do you think of the argument that like, well, women should just, give up 9 months of their life, have the kid and then put it up for adoption? I'm going to stop share. So take a minute or two to kind of do that. Whoops. Slide 5. Okay. So I think what I'm trying to get at with this question is that like we don't really talk about pregnancy in this country except as like this amazing thing. You're glowing, right? You get like 9 months off from a period. Aren't you lucky? So we don't really talk about pregnancy very much. And we definitely don't talk about the risks associated with pregnancy. So I had gestational diabetes. And if that's not controlled, that means like suddenly you're diabetic when you're pregnant and not before and not after. It's very strange. And like the risks of diabetes are like, it has expenses, insulin and stuff like that. And the risks are that like you can go into a coma, like literally like a diabetic coma, you can die. There's so many ways to die during pregnancy. I was shocked, right? It's actually like pretty terrifying. Preeclampsia, um, uh, is another one. Another friend of mine had what is that thing? Well, she had a thing where basically half of her face was paralyzed.
That's Bell's palsy.
Bell's palsy, thank you. And like, so like she had like that just randomly happens when your body, like when you're pregnant. Another thing when you're pregnant is like you can like anyone else know any? Of course, I'm like the pregnant one. Of course, I'm drawing a blank. Well, not the pregnant, but I have been like, but like I'm drawing a blank now. It's also like a huge infringement on your time. Like if you're pregnant, they'd like ignore you for the first trimester. And then like when it comes to the second trimester, they want to see you every month. And then after that, it's like every 2 weeks. And then towards the end, it's every week that you have to go see your doctor. It's like a huge time commitment, especially if like you don't have insurance or you don't have, if you have Medicaid and it's not covered, right? Anyone else kind of want to ask anything about pregnancy and the dangers of pregnancy? It's terrifying. You can die in childbirth. People still do. Like and disproportionately the people who die in and post childbirth are women of color, which kind of takes us to the next one. So medicine, health, and reproductive justice. So Noah wrote a little bit about biopower. Biopower is so fascinating. Michel Foucault kind of came up with it in the late 70s. And it kind of refers to the practices of modern states to regulate their subjects through technologies of power like medicine. His kind of famous line is like certain populations are made to live. So like this would be like one way of like outlawing abortion. You're making women you're kind of making subjects kind of bear the next, you're making women of a certain class and of a certain color, reproduce, making live, while other populations you kind of like let die by not giving them adequate healthcare or medical treatment or enough food or enough shelter, right? And so Foucault kind of came up with this as kind of like, this is one way that like racism gets embedded in the modern state according to who gets made to live and who gets let kind of die off. Let's see, what do I have here? Not all women's health and sexuality has been medicalized in the same ways. Class and race differences have made women of color and people with disabilities targets of public health campaigns to regulate their sexuality and reproduction. Women give up a great deal of agency and authority, especially during labor. Okay, yeah. So one kind of, this is kind of related to the point I was just talking about ways to like die during pregnancy, is also like the lack of agency and ability to make decisions when you're pregnant. So anyone heard about like the increasing statistics and number of women who are given C-sections? Anyone heard about this? So the idea is that a lot of women are kind of like, especially in public hospitals, where a lot of women of color kind of go, like women are not allowed to they're discouraged from going into labor naturally because it's kind of inconvenient for the doctors to be called in at any time. And instead they're kind of really encouraged to schedule C-sections. So like the idea is like women kind of like, they have their baby on a timetable, stuff like that, or they're induced. The problem with this is like C-sections are really hard to recover from, much harder than a natural pregnancy. So like a C-section, you actually can't lift anything, like not even like the baby and its carrier. You're not supposed to go upstairs. You're not like, even like after giving birth, you're not supposed to drive, but like it's like weeks after you give a C-section. actually get a C-section. And so like, again, like it's kind of like the convenience of the doctors and the medical establishment is kind of put forward, you know, ahead of women's bodies, ahead of women's, you know, lives and recoveries. There's a article I posted in the recommended about like coerced and forced C-sections. The chances of, this should say, chances of coercion increase if women of if it's a woman of color, if it's the woman is unmarried, if she's on Medicaid, all of the things that make women kind of more vulnerable. And then we have this history of sterilization. You guys remember some of the stuff that from the reading about that? So this is the other side of the abortion debate. Like certain women don't want to have kids, but other women maybe do want kids and they are kind of prevented by the state, and their stories don't get told because they're more vulnerable and because our society doesn't consider their lives as valuable. So a lot of women were sterilized throughout much of the 20th century. Do you know what kinds of women were sterilized?
Women working with dangerous chemicals.
Yes, that was a famous study in the 70s. Women working with dangerous chemicals were forced to be sterilized, even though their male counterparts were not forced to be sterilized. Because the idea is that the lead would hurt the fetus. Even though they weren't pregnant and were not planning on becoming pregnant, they were still forced to undergo sterilization, unlike the men, if they wanted these higher paying jobs. Also, developmentally disabled women were disproportionately sterilized. So often ones that are institutionalized and stuff, they got their uteruses removed, which kind of doesn't make sense because either they're not old enough to have sex or they're old enough to make their own decisions, right? Like why is the government sterilizing women with developmental disabilities? A lot of women in California prisons have continued to be forcibly sterilized as recently as 2010. So if you are a criminal, you're not allowed to have children anymore? Like what? Again, who does this affect? Poor women and women of color. And as of April 2017, 20 countries in Europe require sterilization in order for trans people to obtain legal gender recognition. This is like so fucked up. Like, if you want to be trans, you're not allowed to have a child. Like it's okay. And then this is the one that River was talking about. Oops, I have a message. Oopsie. Oh, go ahead, River. That was a long time ago. Go ahead.
Wait, for what?
I don't know. I think you messaged me and I'm only seeing it now. You had said you had something to say before I moved on.
That was probably a few slides ago.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So Hannah, you want to talk a little bit? I know you have to go in like 5-ish minutes, but
Yeah, so do you want to click on the link quick?
Mm-hmm.
And we can just scroll like sort of through it. So recently there was a whistleblower report, which means that the person that reported this is safe by government and law. They were reporting against a government company that they were working for. And basically what they said is that in the detention centers, they are making women by force sterile, and they're sterilizing women in the detention centers. And technically that is highly illegal. The detention centers are for holding. I'm really against them. I think later on in history, we're going to find out that there are more concentration camps than detention centers. I just don't agree with them. This makes me highly upset, so it's really hard for me to talk about, but I actually read about this about 10, 11 months ago. So this has been going on for a really long time. Only NPR and New York Times, as I've known of so far, has posted on the issue. So it's not throughout the media. Not a lot of people know about it. So now you guys know, so now you guys can talk about it and maybe help out with it and get the word out.
So the idea is like they want to prevent anchor babies, which
Right.
is, again, like it's a total, it's dog whistle politics to even call children anchor babies. But like, again, like
Yeah.
certain women are forced to have children, and other women who maybe don't fit like the color and the
Ideal standards.
right.
Since they are minorities in the detention center, it's so much easier to take advantage of them. They don't have legal paperwork, hence why they're in the detention center. So then again, they are also in a vulnerable state. A lot of them don't want to go back to where they originally came from. So there's a lot of power dynamic. If anybody's taken any intro to communications class, you learn about like power dynamics, and they're just taking advantage of the vulnerability of minorities of the country. So.
Go ahead, River.
I just find it funny that they claim these children to be anchor children, yet they also deport these children with the parents.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it doesn't.
If they're such bad things and they're anchors, apparently, why are you deporting them?
Yeah. So again, like certain women are made to have children and certain women are punished for having children, or disallowed from having children. Exactly. Right. Good. All right. So this wasn't in your reading. It's in one of the recommendeds. I'll see if I can't be quick. So many public hospitals have in the past created programs to secretly test whether a woman had drugs in her system. So like you go in and you give blood all the time when you're pregnant anyway. But these hospitals secretly kind of tested to see if there were drugs. And if drugs were found in a woman's system, she was arrested for distributing drugs to a minor through the umbilical cord and incarcerated shortly after birth. Which always seemed really weird to me, right? But these women who were secretly tested and, incarcerated and prosecuted are disproportionately low-income women of color. There's often faulty results and false positives. So women have had their lives destroyed for this. But also if a woman legit is, addicted, because these things are addictive to heroin or oxycodone or something like that. Very few drug treatment programs accept women because, they might be pregnant. Fewer still accept pregnant women. If you're a pregnant woman, you really have a hard time. You're not even allowed to take cold medicine. You're not even allowed to take aspirin. So no one's going to give you, what is this? Methadone. No one's going to give you methadone. And then even fewer accept women who are on Medicaid. So so you're in an impossible situation, you're addicted, you end up pregnant, you can't get into a program, and then you're tested and arrested and incarcerated for distributing drugs to a minor. It's just like, talk about a double bind. It's like a quadruple bind, right? And then the Hyde Amendment is part of this. All right. The last thing I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about is something that Olivia mentioned, is that Black women and Black infants are much more likely to die. So here, this is infant mortality. All kind of infants in the US, there's 6 out of 1,000 pass away. Higher income, white mothers, fewer even than that. But if you look at the African American mothers, it's double. So newborns, twice as many Black newborn babies die after birth as white, right? And then if you look at the maternal mortality rate, 12 out of every 100,000 births, a woman will die after, you know, birth. But for Black women, it's 43. So 43, like that's like quadruple. So we're 3 times more likely to have premature births. Mothers die 3 to 4 times more often than white mothers, and infants die twice as often as white babies. But African women had similar pregnancy outcomes to white American women. Let's just think that, let that sink in for a minute. So Black women from Africa had just as had more like this and more like this, or more like this. So something specific about being an African American woman or child that makes you more vulnerable after giving birth. So this suggests it's not genetics. What do you think could be the reasons for this disparity? Why do so many more Black babies not live past their first couple months? Why do so many Black mothers, and it doesn't have anything to do with their class or their level of education, you know, even controlling for that, a lot of Black women still die more often. Why do you think that this happens?
Could it be some of the stereotypes that they can endure more pain?
Yes. So doctors not believing them when they feel like something is wrong, right? So doctors kind of writing them off as kind of, you know, hysterical when they say that they are in pain or that something doesn't feel right. Yes, I think that is definitely part of it. Good. Other stuff? Other reasons? A lot of kind of stuff has been linked to like how stressful it is to kind of experience systematic racism or structural racism. Like it actually kind of takes a physical toll on your body to kind of experience microaggressions all the time and to kind of try to figure out, okay, was this person just being like horrible, or was this person like actually racist? Like that's actually kind of stressful. And like having that kind of stress for like your like a lot of your life can actually make you more susceptible to heart problems. It can actually hurt your heart and your blood pressure and stuff like that. And so kind of couple that with like doctors kind of disbelieving women anyway, and especially disbelieving Black women about their pain. And you get these numbers. And this is not how it should be. And so again, like Black and women of color are disproportionately made to have children and also are disproportionately dying after having those children. So like, instead of like talking about abortion, we need to talk about reproductive justice. We need to give women, you know, the resources. And, you know, we need to legislate maternity leave, and we need to subsidize childcare and maybe even diapers and formula. You know, these are things that should be government subsidized, that the government kind of, you know, helps to pay for, because when the kids grow up, they help the whole society, you know, right? Like, see, having killed children is simultaneously seen as like selfish, and also not having them is also seen as selfish. There's just no winning. So this is why we need reproductive justice, not only to kind of help women of color not have children when they want to, but also help them have children and have happy children and have, you know, children who have a good shot at life, right? This is reproductive justice, not just helping white women not have kids when it's inconvenient for them, but also helping women of color to have children when they want them and be supported in having children, right? Anyway, sorry, I'm super passionate about this. All right, so we're about out of time. We need more healthcare. We need part-time work that's lucrative. Okay, so what are some of the ways reproductive justice attempts to address the racism? I feel like we covered this. You don't have to do this one. Here you can see like, you know, some other stuff. Any final thoughts that you guys have for us today about reproductive rights and abortion? I hope I didn't make anyone feel too shut down. I hope, like, if you're pro-life, I think that is good, and I think there are reasons for that, but like instead of like and maybe you can convince others who are pro-life to like also kind of like redirect their pro-life energies into like making that life livable for a large part of the population, instead of just like valuing life and then once someone's born to kind of drop them to kind of make life livable for all. Cool. All right, next class, gender and sports. Lauren is presenting, Maddie is presenting, and it's gonna be awesome. I will see you soon. Don't worry about discussion 12.3. Thanks for an excellent discussion today, guys. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
thank
good day.
You too.
Have a good day.
Bye, River. Mel, Maddie, any questions for me?